Hello there, you're listening to The Naked Pravda. I'm your host, Kevin Rothrock, Meduza's English language managing editor. And on today's show, we're talking about dirty air and filthy earth. More specifically, we're looking at how scientists in Novosibirsk reacted last month to some new research on atmospheric and soil pollution in cities across Siberia. But before we get into that reaction and the political fallout afterward, it's worth noting that Siberia's environmental situation isn't so great, which may surprise you if you're a nincompoop like me, who casually assumes that Siberia is just too damn big and, full of trees and whatever to be seriously affected by spill here or some fumes there. According to this new report presented in March to the Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences, 78% of the 20 worst polluted cities in Russia are located in the Siberian Federal District, where 23 different cities have high air pollution index scores, including 9 cities in the Irkutsk region, 5 in the Krasnoyarsk territory, and 3 in the Kemerovo region. A whopping 99% of people who reside in the Taimyr Peninsula are living in high air pollution. Now, granted, that's only about 5,000 people, but pretty much every last one of them is sucking down poison with pretty much every breath. In Siberia's worst affected cities, the most common pollutant is a highly carcinogenic hydrocarbon called benzoprene. Anyway, it spreads mostly in emissions from aluminum production. The water and dirt in Siberia has problems too. 68% of the surface runoff in the Tomsk region is polluted. More than 1 million people live there. In the Novosibirsk region, where almost 3 million people live, this figure is 82%. As you can imagine, these levels of pollution cause more than just a bit of coughing or discomfort. Researchers also found high incidences of disease among residents in Kemerovo, Krasnoyarsk, Novokuznetsk, and Irkutsk. Scientists also linked pollution to cancer in Krasnoyarsk, congenital development defects in Kemerovo, and children's diseases in the Altai territory. The kicker here is that this report, presented on March 25th to the Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences, wasn't destined to be a bombshell. In fact, researchers drew their data from open sources, including information from Russia's Hydrometeorology and Environmental Monitoring Federal Service. So these numbers were already out there. A team of scientists merely put them together. What turned the study into something that drew attention was the reaction from this presidium of the Siberian branch of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Its members argued that this new report was alarmist, and one scientist even said federal monitors don't actually have enough accurate instruments to know what Siberia's real pollution levels actually are. This whole discussion was live-streamed on YouTube, and the Presidium invited a Streisand effect by hiding it a day or so later. In other words, they made the problem worse. After news of the scandal broke, journalists from Taiga Info and Novaya Gazeta even watched the whole video, which quickly resurfaced elsewhere online. If nobody had tried to take this thing down in the first place, it's hard to imagine many people suffering through all 4 hours of that footage. When asked about this decision to withhold the new pollution research, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov told journalists last week that the Putin administration played no role in the process. This was the scientists' own decision, so go ask them, Peskov said.
I think we should ask some psychologists about that. I don't know what is happening inside their heads, but I can speculate.
That's Elia Kabanov, a science writer whose work has appeared in news outlets like Taiga Info, Dilettant, and Republic magazine. He's reported extensively on pollution in Siberia, and he grew up in Novosibirsk. I asked him why he thinks this presidium of scientists was so worried that research about such a well-known problem based on open-source data would be politically risky. He says this kind of paranoia is typical in scientists who came up during the Soviet era. Scientists like chemical physicist Valentin Parmon, who warned against the pollution report's supposed alarmism.
My guess is that this scientist, he's a real old school guy, and he's been around for a long time. And he used to live in this atmosphere of fear, and he used to try to guess what the current party line is. And as we all know, the party line in Russia is shifting constantly. And one day it could be beneficial for your career to be an environmentalist. and to speak openly about the environment. And the other day you feel like you shouldn't talk about it at all. And my guess is that he tried his best to guess what he should do right now. And if you listen carefully to the recording of this session, he was the first to suggest the ban of this information, although the author of the report said many times, repeatedly, that it's based on not only on open data, but on the data from government sources, government agencies. So it's all been published a lot of times.
Is this something that scientists are always kind of battling with? When it's a good time to speak openly about things that are already in the open? Is that like a common occurrence?
I'd say that it is true for an older generation of scientists, and they are not particularly keen to be open and to speak to journalists and to tell the general audience about their research, either because they don't want to or because they feel that it's something that general audience shouldn't know.
Do you know if that occurs in other countries? Is that something you're aware of happening in other places?
I think that scientists in many parts of the world are aware of the necessity to explain their research to general audience, because the funding of their research is depending on general audience. And Russian scientists don't see it that way. They don't see the taxpayers' money as a source of their funding.
This might be a dumb question, but why exactly is pollution in Siberia so bad? Because it's, to somebody who doesn't understand this, it's like, well, Siberia is like endless and there's hardly any people. Like, why would they be suffering with pollution? There should just be, green and snowy spaces. Why do you think it's so bad there?
It's a great question. The fact is that Siberia is not a natural reserve. Siberia is full of industrial centers, industrial cities that were built decades ago during Soviet times. And it's very dirty industries like metal casting and things like that. And nobody cared to modernize it and to invest in new technologies and to invest in preventing the pollution. So these days we have to deal with that. And it's especially hard for people who live in these cities. They have to breathe this air and to drink this water. It's a huge problem in Siberia. I'd say not only in Siberia, in other parts of Russia as well, but for Siberia it's especially ironic because we used to think of its endless field of forests, of taiga, things like that.
I got a slightly different answer when I asked physicist and environmental activist Yaroslav Nikitenko about funding for science in Russia. He says the Russian Academy of Sciences relies especially now on the state for the money it needs to operate, hence the sensitivity to anything that might rock the boat politically.
The Russian Academy of Sciences is very much dependent on the state because of it's financed from the federal budget. Most of scientific research is funded by the state. In many different countries, business finances a lot. But in Russia, the situation is different.
This relationship, moreover, has become worse in recent years, says Nikitenko.
It's more like in India, like 2/3 of all income is from the state. And also we know that government can make very bad things to science. For example, like 7 years or 5 years ago, there was this notorious reform of the Russian Academy of Sciences, and many scientists opposed that. There were huge demonstrations, and it was, I think, pretty harmful for the academy, because now it has a status like any other federal agency. It was something special before that, and a lot of new bureaucracy was introduced. So I think that many scientists and especially directors of institutions of science, they are very much connected to the state. They depend on the state and a bit afraid of the state.
Do you have any sense of what that relationship, like how it plays out on a kind of day-to-day basis? Because I know that during the Presidium meeting, the one that was broadcast on YouTube and then later removed from YouTube, at least where it was initially posted, one of the scientists suggested I think one of the senior scientists was saying that this sort of research on pollution needed to be coordinated directly with the government. And so does that mean that like a scientist runs all the numbers and finishes the report and then they share it with somebody in either a governor's administration or the president's administration? Do you have any sense of what the conversation actually is there? Is it okay to publish this, or do we change the numbers, or how does it actually, what's the coordination exactly? What are they talking about?
Well, I've never heard about changing numbers, so any falsifications, I'm not saying about this. I just don't know, and I think let's say it didn't happen because we can't be sure. But usually we know that they are very much dependent. For example, the director of the institute, he's not elected only by personnel but of that institution, but also it must be agreed by the ministry. And this is the dependence of directors. So they can be fired at any time.
Why do you think that there's such sensitivity to scientific research about pollution, let's say in Siberia or anywhere in Russia? It seems as though the pollution is so bad and such a part of everyday life that it's not a secret to anybody. And the numbers, for instance, that this latest research in Siberia, it was all based on open source and many of it government source information. And yet there seems to be a great deal of caution about putting this out publicly. Why are they so sensitive to this information if everybody seems to already know it? Why do you think that scientists are reluctant to talk about this, even if it's sort of obvious to everyone?
They want to mitigate the risks. And I noticed that, of course, I wasn't at that meeting, but I read some reports, and they mentioned that we should not publish this before the elections. And this indicates that this is very, very much connected to the power of Russia, to this party of power, and not to science. Because for science, it doesn't matter when you publish your research. I think that there were some maybe public sources, open information, but also scientists, they have many, many detectors with unique information, and not all data is open. But so I don't know why there was so much feared. And I don't know whether there was something new in the data. I can say that government tries to hide a lot of environmental information, and this is a very big problem.
Do you think that environmental activists are able to achieve very much in Russia? Because it's kind of an ongoing news story that is some kind of landfill nearby, or there's some kind of industrial pollution that is upsetting the ecology of some town or city, and the locals get together and they protest, and sometimes it sounds like they get some kind of industry stopped or halted, and maybe even there's a cleanup effort. But what's your impression of the sort of health of the environmentalist movement in Russia? Is it able to achieve change or stop pollution in any instances, or would you say that for the most part it doesn't really have the power right now to effect change?
I think it is mostly like all other activism in Russia. And one of the biggest problems is that our society is pretty passive. Is it from the Soviet Union, when everything was done by the state and there were huge repressions? Or is it just because of today? I don't know, but usually people are very reluctant to go out and defend their rights, be it environmental rights or other rights. And usually when there is a protest, in the majority of cases, the government or business, they win because they are more organized, they have more resources. But there are cases when it's possible to win. For example, in Shias, in Arkhangelsk region, they defended their land from garbage from Moscow. And this was a very good victory.
I live in Moscow. I go back to Novosibirsk maybe twice a year, and I travel frequently to other Siberian cities. And the environment was a big part of my reasoning to move from Siberia to Moscow, because although Moscow is a big city with a huge population, it's cleaner than Novosibirsk, and the air is cleaner, the water is more drinkable than in Novosibirsk. So yeah, I came to Moscow because I'm tired of breathing dust particles in Novosibirsk.
Is that something that people talk about openly? I mean, because it seems like it would be ever present. Like if you live there, it's just part of your daily life. So in your experience when writing about these environmental issues in Siberia and in other places across Russia where the pollution is particularly bad, what's the kind of nature of the public discussion around those issues? I'm just curious, is pollution just a part of like daily conversations? Do you look at the air quality index? I mean, this happens in California now because they have fires every summer or whatever, but is it something that you have to kind of work into your daily routine where you look and see, is it bad today?
I would say that yes, it's a part of daily lives of people who live in Siberia. They talk about it a lot. I'm not sure if anyone tried to learn what a particular level of pollution today, but it's a topic of discussions among people.
And what are you mentioned dust in the air. What are the particular kinds of pollution that most affect just people kind of? I know there are heavy metals in the soil and the runoff water, and that can lead to like long-term problems, and there are carcinogenics and so on. But what are the kind of like forms of pollution that you face kind of like on a daily level?
As far as I understand, it's heavy metals, yes. It's the products of burning coal and oil and gas. So all kinds of this stuff. And in some parts of Siberia, it's radioactive pollution. For example, there was a story last week in one small village. The water source was polluted with uranium or something like this. And in Novosibirsk and in many other parts of Siberia, the huge problem is so-called natural levels of radon. So radon appears naturally in many stones and granite and all sorts of things. And because of the geography, it's a particular problem in Siberian cities. So we used to have daily, So in my school, they used to open doors and windows daily just to blow the radon away.
To improve the ventilation, they'd kind of...
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And are the consequences of that people experience kind of themselves? Is it like coughing, shortness of breath? Are they like birth defects? Like how are people actually? I know there are many things that these elements and these types of pollution can do to the human body, but in your experience, just reporting on these issues and living in these places, how do people actually experience? How do they experience these forms of pollution? What does it do to them?
Well, first of all, life expectancy is lower. In many parts of Siberia, the rates of cases of cancer is much higher, and respiratory diseases are frequent as well. So it's a huge problem for health for people who live there.
Can you describe any of the cleanup efforts insofar as they happen at all? Because I know during the Presidium meeting that was that just happened recently, one scientist mentioned that this new pollution research could be a problem for negotiations that have been apparently ongoing with the Rusal aluminum company, and that that could be a voluntary cleanup effort, and that if we publish this research, it could make waves and just kind of chase them away. Are scientists rightfully afraid sometimes that their work could disrupt these kind of fragile partnerships with corporations? I mean, how do they navigate those issues?
That's another thing. And to explain what the problem is, we should dive deep into the nature of relationship between scientists and the government. And what the Russian government is saying to scientists is, you have to earn your own money. So we don't want to finance you. We don't want to invest in science. Just feel free to get finances elsewhere. And what should scientists do? They go to the companies, to Norilsk Nickel, to Rusal, to other polluters, and ask for grant money. And then they do research in regions where these companies are contributing to pollution. And it's a huge conflict of interests, I would say. And just today, I've read a report published by the Siberian branch of Academy of Science last year. It's a report about their expedition to Norilsk. And this expedition was financed by Norilsk Nickel. And nowhere in the report they are disclosing this very important information. This report does say that there is some pollution, but they try to greenwash it as well. Yeah. For example, one of their ideas is because one of the lakes in this Norilsk region was polluted decades ago, we shouldn't care about current pollution. Which is funny.
You've been listening to The Naked Pravda, an English-language podcast from Meduza. On today's show, we discuss pollution in Siberia and the politics scientists navigate when researching these environmental threats. You also heard from science writer Elia Kabanov and physicist and environmentalist Yaroslav Nikitenko. The Naked Pravda is a podcast from Meduza. It's our only English-language show. And next week, we'll probably be talking about either the military tensions again at the Russian-Ukrainian border, or hopefully about something less ominous. Maybe Russia's genetic research program. Meduza released a major report on this earlier this week, and I'm busy translating it into English right now. Signing off, this is Kevin Rothrock, and I hope you'll recommend us to your friends and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're tuning in to help put this program in front of more people. Thank you for listening, and come back soon.